Good morning, Morai Rabotai, Biruchim Abayim. We are continuing our Masechet Rosh Hashanah, and we are on Daf Tet, Amud Bet, the top line, Tan Rabbaran. Today's Amud is being learned as a Zechut Rufa Shelma for Daniel Moshe Ben Farangis ve Avraham. They should have Rufa Shelma, and also for Rufa Shelma of Rachel Simcha Bat Nahid, and Catherine Esther Bat Flora. All should have Refuah Shelema. This one is also dedicated to Nishmat Betzalel ben Rafael Esther, Esther Bat Naftali Tzvi Halevi, and the month's learning of the community has been graciously dedicated by the Shei family and Mahbubi families. There should be an ultimate zechut for all of their mishpachot. Amen. Amen. So we started the discussion of Shmitot veYovelot. We basically delved into a Shas concept of Tosefet Shabbat from before Tosefet Shabbat afterwards, which really lends itself not to just Shabbat, but any day or period that is considered Shabbat, namely not just Shabbat, but Yom Tov, Yom Kippurim, Shemitah. And now the Gemara is going to discuss the halachot of Yovel. Now the pasuk says Yovel hi, and the pasuk of Yovel hi tiyeh lachem. Those 4 words in the pasuk seemingly are superfluous. They're not needed in the pasuk itself. We'll read them together. The wording of the psukim about Yovel: Ve'ha'avarta shofar teruah b'chodesh hashvi. And pay attention to not just what the content of the psukim are, but also the order of these psukim. So the first thing that the pasuk says is Va'avartem shofar shofar teruah b'chodesh hashvi'i be'asor lachodesh. In the 7th month, on Yom Kippur, the 10th of the month, you blow shofar. B'yom HaKippurim ta'aviru shofar b'chol arsechem. That's one pasuk. And then it says, V'kidashtem et shnat ha-chamishim shana. You sanctify the 50th year. Ukratem deror ba'ares. And you call freedom that avadim go home. Ukratem deror ba'ares, l'chol yoshvea. And these are the psukim, the words rather, that we're going to be busy with. In the second pasuk, right after it says Ukratem deror ba'ares, which means Shiluach avadim, the pasuk says Yovel hi tiyeh lachem. Those 4 words. Now we don't need to say this because you just said Kidashtem et shnat ha-chamishim shana. So I know it's Yovel. So the question that we're going to be dealing with is, why in the world would you need to tell me if I took out, surgically remove these 4 words, the pasuk would read just fine. Just fine. Ve'shavtem ish el achuzato ve'ish el mishpachto tashuvu is the end of the pasuk, which the Gemara darshins from. Achuzato is achuzat avot, which means the fields go back to their original shvatim, to the original mishpachot of the owners. Right? So we have shofar, we have shiluach avadim, and we have the return of the karkaot, right? And obviously we have the prohibition of work, that you cannot work the land on the Jubilee year and the 50th year. So there are 4 mitzvot of the 50th year. There is a mitzvah of not working the land, the underlying mitzvah of Yovel. Then you have to blow shofar, you have to send the avadim, and you also have to return the karkaot. And the order that are mentioned, the psukim is, in the first pasuk, you have the blowing of the shofar. In the second pasuk, you have the shiluach avadim of sending people home. Immediately afterwards, there are these 4 seemingly extra words in the pasuk. Yovel, he is Yovel. Tiyeh lachem, it should be for you. It is Yovel, it should be for you. And then it says, V'shavtem ish el achuzato, discussing the mitzvah of return of the fields to their original owners. Right? Now, you'll see in just a moment why we're emphasizing the number and the order of these things. Gemara starts asking the question, Tan Rabbanan, Yovel hi tiyeh lachem. This Yovel hi is seemingly coming to tell you that it will be Yovel regardless of what you do. It's like Shabbat, here it comes, whether you're ready or not, it comes. Yovel also is going to be asur to work your lands regardless of any of the other mitzvot that you have to do. In other words, even if you don't blow shofar, even if you don't send the avadim, even if you forcefully hold the karkaot and you don't return them to the original owners, still it's going to be asur to work the land. Just like Shabbat, it's not like Yom Tov that the Bet Din has to make it Kiddush HaChodesh until for it becomes Yom Tov. Shabbat comes, whether you're ready for it or not. Here also, it seems like the pasuk says, Yovel hi tiyeh lachem. It is going to be Yovel, whether you keep the mitzvot, the other mitzvot of Yovel or not, it's going to be asur to work the land. Right? That's the mashma'ut of Yovel. It's going to be Yovel, whether you are Kidashtem et Shnat HaChamishim Shana, it's going to be Yovel. So says the Gemara, Af al pi Shelo shamtu, even if you're not keeping Shemitah in Yovel, you're not doing the things that you're supposed to do, Af al pi shelo shalchu, even though that you didn't send the avadim, you still are going to be having the mitzvot of Yovel. Yachol af al pi shelo tak'u, could it be, even if you did not blow shofar, still will be Yovel? Says the Gemara, Talmud lomar hi. We have these two, it's an interesting dichotomy that on one hand you have the word Yovel, on the other hand you have he. He is a mi'ut. So Yovel is a ribui. It's coming to tell you it's going to be Yovel regardless of what you do. It's adding that even if you miss some stuff, it's still going to be Yovel. He is a mi'ut. That's going to be dependent on one thing. Yovel, it is Yovel and not something else. What is restricting Yovel? That if you don't do that one thing, then the prohibitions of Yovel on the land are not going to be applicable. The Gemara says it is the blowing of the shofar. Right, so the Gemara says, if you have one pasuk, one word in the pasuk that is a ribui, and another word in the pasuk that is a miut. You have one ribui, one miut. One of them is telling you it's going to be Yovel regardless, and the other one is telling you no. If you don't do this one thing, then Yovel is restricted, and you don't have the prohibitions of working the land on Yovel if you don't do that one thing. So you chose, says the Gemara, that Tkiyat Shofar, that is the one that's going to stop you. That's important. Sending the Avadim, not so important. If you didn't send the Avadim, you didn't return the lands, you're still good to go. Not good to go, but the land, still the prohibitions of the land are intact in place. But if you didn't blow Shofar, Yovel is not completed. It's not Yovel. It doesn't kick in. It doesn't move into action, so into motion. So it says Gemara, how do you know? You have a mi'ut, you have a ribui. You have to add one of these things and it'll take the other ones out. So how do you know which one to? I say, you know what? Actually, maybe the sending of the avadim should be more important. If you don't send the avadim out, then you're stuck. Shofar, chop, do it, don't do it, should not affect it. So how do you know that you chose shofar versus sending of the avadim? So this is the Gemara, and this is Rabbi Yossi, right? The Gemara says, "Afal pi shelo shalchu Talmud lomar hi." This is the words of the Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says shofar is what stops you. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Yovel hi afal pi shelo shamtu, afal pi shelo shalchu, yachol afilu shelo tak'u Talmud lomar hi. So Rabbi Yehuda is the one that says you have to send the avadim for it to work. And Rabbi Yossi is the one that says you have to blow shofar for it to work. So machlokit. And the Gemara says, so how do I know which one is which? יכול אף על פי שלא תקעו, תלמוד לומר היא, וכי מאחר שמקרא אחד מרבה ומקרא אחד ממעיט, when you have one ריבוי and one מיעוט, מה אני אומר, מפני מה אני אומר, how do I know that יובל היא אף על פי שלא שלחו, ואין יובל אף על פי שלא תקעו? How do I know that תקיעת שופר is what stops you, but not sending of the avadim? And Rabbi Yossi explains it. So Rabbi Yossi, who says that Tkiat Shofar is Ikar, and that's what stops you from having Yovel, he says, I'll tell you two logical, good reasons why without Shofar you're stuck, but without Shiluach Avadim, you're not stuck. Says Rabbi Yossi, לפי שאפשר לעולם בלא שילוח עבדים. Reason number one, the world you could have a reality in the world that no Jew in the world owns a Jewish slave. Could be, we could imagine such a reality, especially nowadays. So if you don't have a Jew that owns an Eved, you're going to say, well, it's not going to be Yovel until 50 years from now. You know, it's the reality of the world. Sometimes people own slaves, sometimes people don't own slaves. But there's no possibility that the world would not have one horn. One shofar doesn't exist in the entire Jewish community of the world. That's very unlikely, right? You stick an animal, you make shofar. You could have a reality, no Eved, but you can't have a reality of no shofar. So that's reason number one why shofar is ma'akev, but shiluach avadim would not be ma'akev because maybe nobody has avadim. Says Rabbi Yossi, the second reason, davar acher, another reason for why tkiat shofar is the ikar, and without it Yovel does not move into motion, versus sending the avadim. דבר אחר, זו מסורה לבית-דין וזו אינו מסורה לבית-דין. תקיעת שופר, you could make sure that it happens. Because who blows shofar? The beit-din blows shofar on Yom Kippur. It's not every shul blowing shofar like we have nowadays. The beit-din blows shofar and you could ensure that the beit-din blows the shofar. That is very much under our control. But, shiluach avadim, it's not under our control. Shiluach Avadim was one of the hardest mitzvot. Yirmiyahu Navi has to chastise Klal Yisrael because it's very hard. Imagine to yourself, you have this maidservants or this Avadim, the servants, that they're doing everything for free in your house. You paid once, and now for up to 49 years they've been working, right? You wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning, the coffee is ready, the house is swept, you know, the animals are saddled, everything is ready, and all of a sudden you have to just send them off. It's very difficult. You read Tanakh, the psukim that lament the fact that Klal Yisrael fell short in this mitzvah is, it's difficult. The entire Shemitah thing is very difficult. Yovel is very difficult. So we can understand that some people, I can't control everyone sending their avadim, but I could control me blowing shofar, betin one person, and that's very much under control. So says Rabbi Yossi, that's why Tkiat shofar is makiv, because that is under your control. It's very difficult to say, well, Hashem hinged the entire Yovel, the isur of working the land on Yovel, to something that you can't even control as leadership. It's every person's thing you can't really control. But the blowing of the shofar. So now Rabbi Yossi gave two solid, good reasons for why he holds that the Tkiat shofar is makiv, is the ikar, and not shiluach avadim, sending of the avadim. Now we're very stuck with Rabbi Yehuda, especially after reading the reasoning of Rabbi Yossi. We're like, wait a second, so why does Rabbi Yehuda hold over here? Rabbi Yehuda holds exactly the opposite. The shofar is not makiv, and shiluach avadim is makiv. That's now even more strange than before. But before we discuss Rabbi Yehuda, the Gemara says, why do you need two reasons? Why davar acher? So one reason is that you said two solid reasons. One of them should be enough. Why do you need two reasons, Rabbi Yossi? Says the Gemara, my davar acher. What's davar acher? Second reason. If you want to say that's impossible, that there's no Jew in the world that owns a Jewish slave, well, somewhere someone is going to have some Jewish slave. So that, and therefore, it's not a sufficient reason why you would differentiate between shofar and between shiluach avadim. Therefore, we have a second reason. Davar acher, one of them is controllable. It's an intrinsic reason that the Torah that hinges the mitzvah of Yovel, the isur of avodat karka on Yovel, to one of these three mitzvot of sending the avadim, freeing the lands, and Tkiyat Shofar makes sense to be the one that is ma'akev because it's completely under our control. The other ones are not under our control. That's why you need the second reason. So says the Gemara, Bishlama, now we go back to Rabbi Yehuda. Bishlama Rabbi Yossi. I understand why Rabbi Yossi says what he says because he himself explained two reasons for why he said what he said. Kedekamar, Tame. He said already his reason. Ela Rabbi Yehuda, my Tama. According to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that the Ikar is sending the Avadim, not blowing the shofar, what is his reason? And here the Gemara says something that is also valid Shas-wide. Amar Kara. Now you realize, when we read this, you realize why we emphasize the beginning of Shiur today, what the chronology and the order of the wording in the two psukim that speak about Yovel is, because that's what Rabbi Yehuda uses. He says, well, when you want a darshin, you can't just say, when it says Yovel hitiyeh lachem, it's going back on the beginning of Chumash in Bereshit. You can't say that. Right? That's few Sfarim back. Just like you can't say that, you have to draw the line somewhere. So where do you draw the line of how backwards can I go to say these words are referencing something that was said 3 psukim before, 2 psukim before, 1 pasuk before? Can I say that? Can I just choose what I want the drasha of the pasuk to go on? Or does it have to be immediately juxtaposed to the words that you are darshaning? So again, before we read it inside, let's chazer up in our mind what exactly the psukim said. The 2 psukim that talk about Yovel. The first one speaks about Tkiyat Shofar. Then the second pasuk speaks about sending people home, Ukratem deror ba'ares, and immediately after sending people home, the Avadim home, it says, Yovel hitiyeh lachem. So Rabbi Yehuda says, well, it is juxtaposed with the mitzvah of Shiluach Avadim. That's mikra nidrash lefanav. The mikra, the pasuk is going to be darshined with what's juxtaposed right immediately before it. But not with something that's after it, and not even with something that's before it. Right? So let's read the psukim again. ועברת שופר תרועה בחודש השביעי בעשור לחודש ביום הכיפורים תעבירו שופר בכל ארציכם. That's the mitzvah of blowing shofar on Yom Kippur. 1 pasuk. Next pasuk says, וקידשתם את שנת ה-50 שנה, sanctify the year of the 50, וקראתם דרור בארץ, send the עבדים home, יובל יתהיה לכם. So when it says Yovel hitiyeh lachem, says Rabbi Yehuda, that's going back on what he said right before it, which is send the Avadim home. Not before it, that's 2 psukim, 1 pasuk before, that is Tkiyat Shofar. So when you want to tell me Yovel hitiyeh lachem, that something is hinging, the whole Yovel is hinging on one mitzvah, if you don't do that, the Yovel is not applicable, that is sending the Avadim free. So if you didn't blow shofar, you still have all the restrictions of Yovel. If you refrain from sending Avadim, that nullifies the entire Yovel. That's why it's so important. So says the Gemara, my Tama, Rabbi Yehuda's reason is, Amar kra ukratem deror ba'ares the pasuk says, "Ukratem deror ba'ares yovelhi." It's juxtaposed. V'kasavar, and from Yehuda holds mikra nidrash lefanav. The pasuk is going to be darshened for what's said immediately before it, velo lifnei fanav, but not too much before it. Shofar is already 2 topics before. You can't go 2 topics before. It has to be immediate. And certainly is not nidrash la'acharav. What's la'acharav? After it says, Yovel hiti elachem, it says, V'shaftem ish el achuzato, v'ish el mishpachto tashuvu, which the Gemara Darshind is referring to sending returning the sadot, the fields that you took, right? So the Mikra is not Darshind for what says afterwards, and not for what it says before. It has to be what's before immediately. So that's how I know that out of the 3 mitzvot of shofar, sending the avadim home, and returning the karkaot, the one that is important, that everything hinges on, is sending avadim home. Fine, says the Gemara. Lekula alma deror lashor cherut. Everyone agrees that deror is language of cherut, is freedom. Why? My mashma, how do you see deror that is the lashor cherut? The Tanya, we learned in the Braita. En deror era lashor cherut. Deror is the language of freedom. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, my lashon deror. What's the language? Where do you see dror meaning cherut, meaning freedom? Kemedayer bedaira umovil schora bechol medina. It comes from language of dira. Dira means living. A person that can live anywhere. Freely goes, one day is here, one day is there. No taxes, no restrictions, right? It's an international diplomat. He goes everywhere he wants. There's no restrictions on him. And he brings chorah to anywhere that he wants. He brings merchandise to wherever he wants. A free person, that's what we call it, right? A person that has 0 restrictions. So that's deror. When it says ukratem deror, means you announce freedom to people that were restricted so far, aka slaves. Now they go home and they're free.
This verse is on the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I saw it in person. Right? It's amazing. People used to have actually, it's not the time for this right now at all. But people used to have the Torah values. Now they call it Judeo-Christian values, but they actually had that, and it was until it has been going down, and I think last year officially we hit the rock bottom as a society of Western culture, and in the United States you saw for the first time, the attendance to religious things are going back up now. In males, at least in United States, because again, without values, you cannot live. But that's a whole shmooze by itself. Before we have an Amud to finish, and we have a lot more than Amud to finish. Actually, I wanted to say a little beautiful topic that we have been putting on back burner for a few days. But nevertheless, let's at least finish our part of today. So says the Gemara, deror means freedom. A person that could go anywhere and sell anything he wants anywhere. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Zu divrei Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Yossi. This is Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi. Avar Chachamim omrim, there's a third shita. Chachamim hold sheloshtan makvot, and this is the halacha obviously, because Chachamim, that any of the 3 is makev. For you to have yovel, you have to send the avadim, you have to return the karkaot, and you have to blow shofar. Kasavri, all Chachamim hold, they hold that the pasuk could be simultaneously darshined lefanav, velifnei fanav, vela'acharav. All 3. A pasuk could be darshined with all of its immediate vicinity. Things that are said immediately adjacent to it, to the words of the drasha. One pasuk before, as long as it is the same topic the pasuk is discussing, the pasuk says on Yovel you have to do the following items: blow shofar, send the avadim, and return the karkaot. So when it says Yovel, he goes on everything that it says immediately there. Come on, we're not going to be separating and cutting with scissors things just because there are 3 words beforehand. So Chachamim hold the pasuk is darshin mikra nidrash lefanav velifne fanav veleacharav. All of the 3. So says Gemara, vehaketiv Yovel. Well, this is very second. I have a question. We started the Amud today saying that when it says Yovel is the ribui, and he is a mute. You remember that? So one is adding, one is restricting. So now what are you doing with the adding part of it? You're only restricting, right? So you're saying it can't be Yovel without any of these things, right? That's the he part. What happened with the Yovel part? That in any case Yovel is going to happen regardless of what you do. That would be the ribui that we spoke about up there. You remember? That's why we were saying 2 things are being added, 1 thing is being restricted. If you're telling me that everything is restricted, so what's being added? So what do you do with the word Yovel? That means that even in Chutz La'aretz you have to send your avadim, right? If a Jew owns a Jewish slave in Chutz La'aretz, you also have to send. It's not just the mitzvah in Eretz Yisrael, right? Hey, the Gemara says, it says Ba'aretz. I mean, you can't get more straightforward than this, right? The pasuk says, Ukratem deror Ba'aretz. What's the Aretz? It's Eretz Yisrael. No, that's not true. Hahu, bizman shenoheg deror Ba'aretz, noheg b'chutz la'aretz, bizman she'eno noheg Ba'aretz, eno noheg b'chutz la'aretz. That is coming to teach you that when all the Jews are in Eretz Yisrael, which Yovel, one of the requirements of Yovel is that you have to have the Jewish community as a whole in Eretz Yisrael, right? Correct. So if you have the Jewish community as a whole in Eretz Yisrael, then if you have a Jew somewhere, Nebach, in Los Angeles, right, then he also has to send his avadim off. But if people are not in Eretz Yisrael, the Yovel is not applicable there. If in Eretz Yisrael is not applicable, it's not going to be applicable in Chutz La'aretz. Either it's an offshoot of the mitzvah in Eretz Yisrael. Whenever you have it in Eretz Yisrael, it extends itself to Chutz La'aretz. That's why it says Aretz, Ukratem Teror Ba'aretz. Doesn't mean that in Chutz La'aretz you don't have the mitzvah of Shiluach Avadim. Of course you do have. What it means is it's hinging on Eretz Yisrael. The mitzvah of Shiluach Avadim as a whole hinges on Eretz Yisrael. If you don't have the mitzvah of Shiluach Avadim of Yovel in Eretz Yisrael, you don't have the mitzvah of Yovel in Chutz La'aretz either. And so if you have the majority of the Jews in outside Eretz Yisrael, you don't say, well, if you had them in Eretz Yisrael, doesn't have it. You have to have the majority, you have to have the Jewish community as a whole in Eretz Yisrael. Then when Yovel is applicable there, it extends itself to Chutz La'aretz as well. Now, we basically are done. Let's actually finish this up, and we'll leave the interesting topic that I wanted to talk about. We'll leave it perhaps for the next year. The Gemara says we again back to Daf Bet Amud Aleph. Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, which we call Rosh Hashanah, is called Rosh Hashanah for a bunch of things. Right? It's Rosh Hashanah Leshanim, Leshemitin, Leyovelot. Those 3 we have discussed so far. And then the Gemara says Leneti'ah u'liyerakot. It's also for plantation and for yerakot. So what is that? Leneti'ah menalan. How do you know that Rosh Chodesh Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah for neti'ah, for the plantation? So says the Gemara, Dichtiv Shalosh Shanim Arelim. When we say for neti'ah means for the halachot of orla, that 3 years when you plant a tree, for 3 years you're not allowed to benefit from its fruits, right? It's applicable in ba'aretz, bechutz la'aretz, right? Lifnei habayit, like the Sefer Chinuch writes, it's not restricted by Eretz Yisrael or chutz la'aretz. It's not restricted even by the Beit HaMikdash. So even nowadays, in 2025, in Los Angeles, you still have the restrictions of Orla. You plant a tree, you cannot use it. You plant a nice etrog tree, and it gives you a beautiful etrog, you cannot use it on Chag HaSukkot until 3 years have passed. So what's 3 years? So we said the Rosh Hashanah is, the Rosh Hashanah of Netiah, of Orla, is on Rosh Hashanah, on Echad B'Tishrei. So if you planted it before, right, then you have to have it. This actually happens a lot. I just got this past week, I got a question about a certain family that had purchased a certain, regardless of what type of fruit it was, that purchased a tree, and it actually bore fruit. So they wanted to know if they could have it this year, right? If they could have it this year or not. So, and they didn't know, it looked like a year or 2 years old, and they bought it like, last year. So, you want to know it actually makes a difference, because if you research the tree, and the tree never gives fruits before 2 years, right? So that it has had fruits, yes, last year already. So then, forget about all the kulas of these things nowadays in Chutz La'aretz, Drabanan, not Drabanan. But the Maaseh, if you wait until Rosh Hashanah, and this specific fruit the season is extended until after this Rosh Hashanah upcoming, so you tell, okay, wait until Rosh Hashanah, that even if it was not 3 years now, right, within the next 2 months, 3 months, is going to become 1 year older, because it depends the year it goes after Rosh Hashanah for Netiah, right? It's going to be a year older when it hits Rosh Hashanah. And then for sure it's going to be 3 years. It doesn't have to be 3 times 365, but it has a cutoff line of Netiah. So that, how do I know that it is Rosh Chodesh Tishrei that is that cutoff line? That if you planted it 3 months ago, when it hits Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, now it's a year old. How do I know that? Says the Gemara, because it says Shalosh Shanim Arelim. It says Shanim, Ubashana Aravi'it, and it says, and the 4th year, V'alif Shana Shana Mitishrei. And we learn Gezerah Shavah, Shana Shana from Tishrei, because the pasuk says, Mirashit Hashana V'adacharit Shana. Right? Speaking about Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, it says Rashit Hashana, Adacharit Shana. Here also says Shana Shana, and therefore we learn that it is Echad B'Tishrei. So why is wait a second? Let's learn from another Rosh Hashanah, Shana, that's referring to Nisan, right? Rosh Chodesh Nisan is also considered Rishon Hu Lachem Lechodshei Hashanah. It says Hashanah over there also. The Gemara did this before, and the Gemara answered, it's going to repeat that answer over here. Danin Shana she'eni ma chodashim, mi Shana she'eni ma chodashim. We judge, we learn a Gezerah Shavah, a Shana without Chodshei Hashana, because in Nisan it doesn't say Shana. It's not referring to the year and its totality. It's talking about the months of a year. We could understand that you could have a year that changes from Tishrei, but the Chodashim are counted from Nisan. That's what we have, right? Tafshin Pei is going to turn into Tafshin Pei Vav in Tishrei, but the Chodashim right now is Chodesh HaChamishi. It's not the 11th to 12th months. So says the Gemara, Ve'en dalin shana she'en ima chodashim mishana sheyesh ima chodashim. That basically brings us to the next topic by 2 dots. In the Gemara, Be'ezrat Hashem, we will discuss something fascinating that we've been kind of like putting off in the beginning of the next year. Chazak u'Baruch.